Welcome to the deep dive. So glad you could join us today. We're getting into something incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, it really is a totally different perspective on something we all thought we knew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because today, our core mission is pulling back the curtain on how a human being's identity actually transitions from a public figure into this, self-sustaining, multi-generational institutional asset.
Right. It's about looking past the obvious.
And the source material we have for this is just incredible. We've got our hands on a really detailed institutional asset audit from Hollywood Now TV.
It's titled The Royalty Portfolio, Engineering a Multi-Generational Brand Moat.
Yeah, and right off the bat, I want to set the stage for you listening. We are deliberately, and I mean completely, stripping away the usual emotional, cultural, and tabloid narratives that, always surround Princess Diana.
Right, because when a figure of that sheer magnitude passes away, the immediate focus is naturally on the cultural and emotional shockwave. Everyone looks at the historical impact.
Which makes sense, obviously.
Of course. But operating silently right beneath that public mourning is this frantic, high-stakes scramble to secure the underlying financial and legal architecture of the identity itself.
So we are looking exclusively at the raw economics today.
Yeah.
The estate structure, the high-margin media rights.
Exactly. And whether you're interested in finance or media or, you just want to understand how the attention economy actually works behind the scenes, this audit is an absolute masterclass in long-tail asset management.
It really is. So the deep dive begins right in 1997. Following her death, her financial executors were facing this immediate structural crisis.
They had to act fast.
Yeah, they had to prevent the total liquidation of her assets by the tabloids and somehow position her estate for multi-decade preservation.
Right.
And the source says they achieved this through two very specific legal instruments: a highly structured discretionary will and something called letters of wishes. So let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Because looking at the mechanics here, this operates very differently than a standard last will and testament, right? It's almost like a startup's founding charter.
That's a really good analogy, actually, because a standard will is essentially just a static distribution list.
Like who gets what?
Exactly. It dictates that specific assets go to specific people, and once the cash is handed over, the legal entity's primary job is pretty much done.
Right.
But a discretionary will, that creates a dynamic, ongoing legal fortress. It places the assets into a trust where the appointed trustees have absolute discretion over, how, when, and even if those assets are distributed.
Wow. Absolute discretion.
Yeah. And this is critical because in 1997, her estate wasn't just cash and real estate. It was comprised of tangible assets, global image rights, and just massive cultural equity.
Like the IP of her identity, basically.
Exactly. If the executor simply handed out the assets, all that unquantifiable cultural equity would be fragmented. It would have been immediately vulnerable to taxation, creditors, or just public liquidation.
So the discretionary will acts as this massive shield, holding everything together in one secure vault.
Right.
But what about the other thing, the letters of wishes? How do those fit into managing the vault?
So the letters of wishes act as the strategic operating manual for that vault.
Okay.
Unlike a will, a letter of wishes is not strictly legally binding in the public record.
Wait, really? It's not legally binding.
No, it's a private, confidential document written directly to the trustees. It provides ongoing guidance on the philosophical and strategic intent behind the trust.
Oh, I see. So it keeps them flexible.
Exactly. It allows the estate to remain incredibly agile. If the media landscape changes 20 years down the line, which of course it did, the trustees aren't trapped by rigid, outdated legal mandates from 1997.
They can pivot.
Right. They have the flexibility to pivot their management strategy while still honoring the foundational intent outlined in those letters.
Looking through the source material, the language they use to describe this strategy is intense.
It is very clinical.
It's extremely clinical. The audit refers to her legacy as baseline capital and her public memory as unquantifiable cultural equity. And, I have to push back a little here. Isn't it a bit jarring to talk about a tragic historical event and a real human being purely in these cold corporate terms?
What's fascinating here is that I totally get why it feels jarring. It feels like reducing an identity to a balance sheet. But you have to remember, the executors had a strict fiduciary duty.
Right.
And fulfilling that duty required viewing the situation through a purely economic lens. If they didn't build this legal shield and treat the identity as baseline capital, Her name and likeness would have been aggressively commodified by unauthorized third parties.
Like anyone could just make a buck off her.
Exactly. We would have seen a flood of cheap, unlicensed merchandise, unauthorized biographies, and a rapid degradation of her historical standing. The true economic engine wasn't the physical cash she left behind. No, it was the invisible, recurring licensing power of her name and likeness.
Because the cash is finite, right? But the licensing power is infinite.
Precisely. By insulating that baseline capital, the executors successfully transitioned her from a historical narrative into a foundational pillar of future global entertainment spending.
They basically secured the moat.
They secured the moat.
But, a strong legal shield is really only step one. It's brilliant for defense. It keeps the vultures out. But a locked vault doesn't actually generate the massive cash flows we see today on its own.
No, it doesn't.
So how does an insulated, protected identity actually generate cash? This logically brings us right into the modern media landscape.
Yes. The transition from preservation to what the audit calls cultural syndication.
Yeah, cultural syndication. The source describes archival history as premium fuel for subscription-based content engines. And we see this, right? Streaming networks and Hollywood studios have deployed hundreds of millions of dollars for prestige dramas, documentaries, retrospective features based on the late princess.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge industry.
And reading this, I couldn't help but think of an analogy. Controlling the definitive personal archives sounds exactly like how the De Beers diamond cartel controls the global diamond supply.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Right. Artificial scarcity keeps the value at a premium. But here's my question. How exactly does the estate ensure they get a cut of this massive Hollywood spending? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can't copyright facts.
Yeah, you can't.
So if a major studio decides to write a script based on historical facts from 1995, they can just do that.
Yeah.
Facts belong to the public.
You're entirely right. You cannot copyright the bare facts of a historical event, but, and this is the genius part, you can monopolize the authenticity surrounding it.
Okay, wait. Monopolize the authenticity. How does that work?
Let's break down the mechanics. The estate, alongside designated charities and IP holding companies, manages this incredibly intricate web of copyright permissions, trademark protections, and usage rights. So, if a studio produces an unauthorized biopic relying only on public facts, it inherently lacks the prestige of official backing. It feels like a cheap imitation.
Because they can't use the actual handwriting or an exact replica of a trademark dress or high-resolution personal archives.
Exactly. The estate holding companies control all those touch points of authenticity. They have trademarked specific signatures, logos, likenesses in key global jurisdictions.
Wow.
They control the licensing for the definitive high-resolution personal archives. If a premium streaming service wants their documentary to be considered the definitive prestige project, they need access to those authenticated materials.
And to get that stamp of authenticity, they have to pay the toll.
Exactly. They negotiate strict corporate licensing agreements. They aren't paying for the history itself. They are paying for the exclusive authorized access to the artifacts of that history.
That is so smart. And the audit also explicitly notes something really interesting. The estate uses this web of permissions to deliberately bypass traditional ad-supported networks.
Yes, they do.
They favor these high-value streaming equity deals instead. But what is the structural advantage there? It seems like, normally you'd want your content in front of as many eyeballs as possible.
It comes down to brand equity dilution.
Relution.
Yeah. The ad-supported model is built on volume and ubiquity. The content is broadcast everywhere, constantly interrupted by commercials for, household detergents or fast food.
Right.
In that environment, the brand becomes commodified background noise. The prestige is totally stripped away. Streaming platforms, however, operate on a subscription model driven by exclusive destination viewing.
So the streamers need premium fuel to convince you and me to pay a monthly fee.
Exactly. By maintaining a tight grip on these assets, the brand completely bypasses the cheap ad networks. They dictate the environment in which the legacy is consumed.
They command high-value deals.
Right. They ensure it remains a high-margin, premium-tier status brand. Artificial scarcity works just as effectively in media rights as it does in physical commodities.
Okay, so milking streaming services for exclusive licensing fees is obviously highly lucrative right now.
Definitely.
But trends change, right? The attention economy is notoriously fickle. How do you future-proof a 20th century legacy for 21st century consumers?
That is the big question.
Which pivots us perfectly to the final phase of the audit, the heirs. because the source details how Princes William and Harry crossed the age thresholds of those original trust agreements.
Right, the discretionary will we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And when they hit those ages, they didn't just inherit capital, they inherited a global intellectual property matrix.
Yes. And a major component of that matrix relies on what the audit calls a physical reserve currency.
Which refers to the physical assets, right? Like
Oh.
the iconic wardrobe items, historic jewelry.
Exactly. And this concept of a physical reserve currency is fascinating from an accounting perspective. Think about how a traditional media brand is valued. It's largely based on intangible assets, audience goodwill, projected digital stream.
Which can be really volatile.
Highly volatile. The estate counters that volatility by holding tangible historical artifacts on their balance sheet.
Because, unlike digital content that depreciates, these physical items act as a reserve currency that appreciates exponentially over time.
Right.
Due to permanent historical scarcity.
Right.
I mean, the supply is permanently capped at 0 new item.
Exactly. The physical assets underrate the digital brand's valuation. When an iconic dress is authenticated and auctioned for millions, it establishes a hard, tangible benchmark for the brand's premium status.
And then they leverage that to justify high licensing fees for the digital rights.
Exactly. But, and this is crucial, an institutional brand cannot survive purely by hoarding artifacts in a vault.
Right, which brings up something I really wanted to push back on.
Oh.
Yeah. The audit explains that the modern strategy involves funneling this brand equity into institutional philanthropy, climate tech investments, mental health advocacy.
Yes, very high-profile initiatives.
Right. But wait, are these high-profile foundation and venture capital initiatives just a strategic business tool? Are they just trying to renew the brand moat for a new demographic?
Yeah.
I mean, is the philanthropy just the ultimate PR strategy here?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it can actually be both genuine and structurally brilliant at the same time.
Okay, how so?
This is the ultimate long-tail asset management. Think about maintaining a brand moat. To keep a legacy relevant to global consumers who weren't even born when the original events took place, you have to attach the intellectual property to the issues driving the modern economy.
So aligning the legacy with modern, forward-looking issues like climate tech.
Exactly. By doing that, the estate continuously captures the attention of global consumers without ever needing what the source calls active product endorsements.
Oh, wow.
Right. The brand functions as a permanent, silent institutional asset that continuously scales in enterprise value. When the name is attached to a major climate fund, the financial press covers it, consumers engage, and the overarching IP value just scales upward.
It's a self-sustaining loop.
Perfectly self-sustaining.
So, bringing this all back to you, the listener, I really want you to think about the media you consume every day.
Yeah, it changes how you look at everything.
It really does. The next time you watch a historical drama or see a high-profile philanthropic venture, you'll now recognize the invisible financial architecture operating beneath the surface.
The discretionary wills, the copyright web.
Exactly. It completely changes how you view the attention economy.
It forces a total reframing of influence. And it leaves us with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Which is what?
Well, building on this idea of a legacy scaling without active endorsements, if a human being's legacy can be engineered to scale infinitely as a silent, perfectly managed institutional asset after they are gone,
Yeah.
are we approaching an era where the most valuable and bulletproof influencers and brand ambassadors of the future aren't living celebrities at all?
Wait, really?
Think about it. What if the best ambassadors are historical figures whose IP is immortal, perfectly curated, and completely immune to real-time public relations scandals?
Oh, wow. That is wild to think about. An uncancelable, perfectly managed influencer.
Exactly.
Well, that is definitely something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been incredibly eye-opening.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you all next time.